All right, let me talk to you here. We got a professional golfer, back pain. Shocking, right? Look, a lot of these things, it's very easy to be jaded in terms of, a lot of the constructs, at least that I would subscribe to, that would suggest when someone is very, very powerful, in this case with golf, creating incredible amounts of rotational forces into an object that doesn't want to move, aka the ball. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. If you are not any type of version of strong, yet incredibly powerful, you're going to run into some business. Let's unravel this a little bit, and we'll talk about a lot of concepts, certainly as it relates to motor skill acquisition and how we'll try to help this particular individual. Now, things that started, the MRI doesn't look like anything. However, there's some language. So I saw the MRI before him coming. When I saw it, I said, yeah, this is probably nothing. However, a 4-5 had a mild bulge, and it gave us some language. And I started to draw a little bit of what the MRI was showing us, okay? And the red is the middle, and the outside is the annulus, and et cetera, et cetera. What I was suggesting at 4-5, like this is what this looks like. And there's really the likelihood that that little bit of something could be significant enough to trigger a threat response is not likely. So I understand why they were saying no big deal. However, at 3-4, also mild bulge, but then some compression on the thecal sac. So I showed him all the different pictures. I said, this is what the anatomy is. And especially went down this road because he asked, he's like, well, what I want to know what this was. I said, I can tell you, I'm not sure the relevance is going to be high on what we do next, but I can certainly do my best to try to explain this. Where what I described here was a little bit of compression, and I showed him on the images where the radiologist felt that this was happening. And what is the thecal sac? It's the surrounding of the spinal cord. And it doesn't have to be particularly meaningful. But now if you have somebody that's particularly sensitive, remember the word that usually can equate to pain is fear, where there's some type of sensory or sensory motor experience and you don't know what it is. That can equate to pain because you don't have a previous memory to equate to this emotion. So it becomes pain, which is this somewhat emptiness that would be very correlative to what we think we know about pain science. I circled the nerve roots to show them what they were where there's no issues. And some of the things that could be stenosing at a nerve root would be fluid, bone spurs, disc fragments, nothing. So I kind of understand why he was told, oh, this is nothing here, except as we started to dig in, we would find that certainly we should be able to say that when we do understand pain science, number one, you could have no reason for surgery. It could be nothing. It could have no meaning for this specific approach. So this was at 3-4. Does that mean we need to do an Eldoa at 3-4? It does not. But it could mean we do. It doesn't matter anymore. Particularly now in this case, it gets murkier because there's no more symptoms. So there's no pain. So we kind of put that in our pocket, but clearly we should say that if someone did have even mild thecal sac compression, no nerve root compression, no peripheral symptoms, no myotomes, dermatomes, nothing, well, could that cause pain at an extraordinary level that comes and goes? And I think the answer is yes. So we started off with the truth and we checked that box. Now let's take a look at what do we know about what the patient says, okay? So this happened 6 days ago. He had a spasm. He's warming up in golf. He was walking with the bag and his bag was on the right shoulder. Put it down like this. That will be important for us. He kind of bent over, bang. He had pain centrally, so in the middle of his spine, lumbar spine, it was parallel. Again, I'm using words so that sometimes just so the patient kind of has a connection to what it is that I'm talking about. Wasn't happy. He took Advil. He was able to play through it. The next morning, he was petting the dog, and then all hell again, and then kind of doing fine. So we have what the patient says, and then the truth. So then when we look at what we learned from evaluation, number one, no pain. Forward bending, no problem. Backward bending, no uniform spinal angle. In fact, only movement in the lumbar. It was almost like this single hinge spot. I couldn't really tell where it is, but you saw a crease. And there was one crease that was larger. There was nothing north of L2, but lower, and I didn't measure right away where it was. Of course, if you put your hands on the pelvic rim, your thumbs probably should be L4, L5. Well, when we did do that, the biggest crease was at L3, L4. There's some significant conformational bias there. But whatever that segment was, because that doesn't mean it has to be this, but what it does mean that that's where there's more movement than there is in other places. Now, arms down, no real change. Not a lot of glide, so the ASIS did not move in front of the toes. This is meaningful. There's something going on here. Rotation for a golfer, a very good turn to the left, less good, but not bad to the right. That's when I went back to the subjective, where'd you have the bag? Because now I'm seeing somebody not turn well to the right, but I don't know why. We looked at one side versus the other, and a much, much better turn when you minimize the impact of both lower extremities. So you get up on your toes on one side, get up on the toes on the other side. So we didn't really pinpoint a hip or an SI issue yet. Didn't look at yet. Okay, moving on. Single leg stance, no big deal. Squat, as you would expect with an elite golfer, easily can get down and get back up. Right medial rotation extension, less than left. Zero issues with external rotation, lateral rotation flexion. Cervical spine, limited, not painful. An interesting cascade of different symptoms. But now when we looked at prone extension, moved much smoother. You still see the L3-4 crease, but he moves much smoother, but not a lot of movement up through the thoracic. Continuing, brilliant hip extension. Rotation on both sides, nothing really sticks out. When you turn them over to supine, significant groin symptoms with Faber. So on both sides, way more on the left. Remember, he had the bag on his right. He had this twisting issue, meaning I was going conformational bias, but now all of a sudden you find significant limitation on the opposite side, hip external rotation. I don't know if that's meaningful, and I'm going to already say I'm going to be very hesitant to change it in an elite golfer or any elite athlete. But does that mean anything? Okay, we did not. Next time we connect, we do need to evaluate the SI joint, and typically with an external rotation issue, you'll see the greater arm of the SI joint, the greater arm of the pelvis will be implicated. So you've got the base and the apex of the greater arm that we need to clear. If I had just treated it and then quickly saw a change, then we'd kind of knock that off the board. But now when you have someone that has asymmetrical hips, and depending on where that SI lesion is, why would it be a 3-4? Well, remember, 4-5 and 5-1 has the lumbopelvic ligament. There is no lumbopelvic ligament at 3-4, at L3 down. It's at 4 down, it's at 5 down. So I'm already kind of getting pushed, and okay, this is meaningful of what we're seeing on this left hip, and we better be cautious and really link that to what he's doing with a driver in his hand so we don't make him a bad golfer. That has to happen. Everybody has to be sitting at the table. Significant limitations through thoracic rotation. So he's getting this huge amount of rotation, at least through the right hip, the left hip internal, the lumbar. And look, that absolutely can create this. Like, that can happen. And this can be raging pain, even though from a surgeon standpoint, it's nothing. And I'm glad that was part of the communication. But if somebody asks what's wrong, then I think it's important to tell them. I don't think coaching someone and helping them understand anatomy and creating equality and letting them integrate the information is a bad thing. So we didn't really look at the right shoulder, but now remember, he's got a brilliant hip extension prone. Thomas test, all 3 of the modified Thomas test positions, no problem. So this is not a hardware issue at the hip, at least with extension. And sure enough, as we dug in, he pulled out some video. This is an individual that, as he attempts to create significant forces through the ground, probably fits this early extension profile, but the early extension is not uniform. He's arching through his back, and he's probably doing it at 3-4, more than 4-5, and more of those 2 segments than 12-1, 1-2, 2-3, and 5-1. So without any issue at 5-1, is it still possible to have an SI issue? Yeah, I guess it's possible. I didn't do the legwork to confirm that yet. what we're trying to then get into is understanding, oh, so this is a glute activation. And that's not a term that you hear me use a lot. So what we went into was understanding that there's three people can look exactly the same and have the same anatomical, potential pathoanatomy, but they're three completely different solutions. So you have somebody that can't even get into the right position and they just bang around. That's not him. Then you have the people that can get into the position but don't. And then out of that, you have the people that can't get into position but don't, but do when they're training, but don't in the golf swing because they've been coached. And we have to draw a big circle around that whole ecosphere and understand that the laws and the rules of motor skill acquisition are not different. So things need to be difficult where you can feel right or wrong. You have to be able to judge right or wrong. And the best way to judge right or wrong is to back away and let them do it on their own. So one of the drills that we started with was inline half kneeling. Now he doesn't have a lot of plantar flexion, so we also had to put a half roller so he doesn't use the toes as a kickstand. And you bring the other leg so you're in line and you're like, yeah, just hang out. He bends forward, he keeps moving the front foot, he's trying to tighten up so he just locks up in a high threshold strategy. And we're trying to explain, no, you can't play golf that way. Just relax, get tall. He's wearing a hat, so we take that button, you're trying to touch the button of your hat to the top of the ceiling. That's an external cue, which would be the next 3 ways that you coach motor skill acquisition in somewhat of an elite fashion. It's not the only way. But helping him understand that you can do all the bridges in the world, but if they're not hard and they're not translating to your golf result, then it's a dumb exercise. You can do them. It might be good for your warm-up. It might be good for your pre-golf routine. That might be fine. Then you got to go to all fours. And the one that I would use the most in all fours is quadruped on elbows, bent leg raise. And that seems to help some people. Does that translate to your golf swing? Because he did say that when he doesn't feel his left hip, the one that has the external rotation limitation, on downswing, impact, and follow through when it's primarily, or at least relatively, externally rotating. So I'm like, oh, that's it. I said, grab onto that. Just keep that and understand that.